Shalom, Gabe Greenberg here, Rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in New Orleans, Louisiana, learning with you this week, as we do every week, the commentary of the Netziv on the weekly Torah portion. This week we're looking at Parshat Behaalotcha. This is Numbers chapter 10, verse 34. It's a quick piece for this week, but it does require a little bit of background. In Parshat Emor, which is in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 43, the Torah tells us that for the holiday of Sukkot, the Jews are supposed to sit in these huts in Sukkot. Why? The Torah says, God says, Ki b'Sukkot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael, because I made the Israelites dwell in huts, in these sukkahs, in their time in the wilderness. And there is an outstanding question, which is, what is the nature of the Sukkot that are being referred to in that verse? Because it's unclear from elsewhere in Tanakh, from elsewhere in the Torah, what does it mean that the Israelites were in huts during their time in the desert? There's no seeming explicit mention of that, and that leads to a famous argument, a famous machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva as to what is the nature of the Sukkot, what is the nature of the huts that the Israelites lived in the Torah that God refers to, and that we should be thinking about, having in mind when we nowadays during Sukkot, when we are in our own Sukkot, what should we be intending it to be a reminder or a reminiscence of? One side of the argument says that it was Sukkot mamash, that we lived in the wilderness in actual huts, and the other side of the argument is that when God says Ki b'Sukkot hoshavti, that I made them dwell in Sukkot, that this is a reference not to actual physical Sukkot, but a reference to the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, which were these clouds that surrounded the Israelites in their travels and travails in the wilderness. So it's either actual huts or these clouds. So with that as backgrounds, let's see what the Netziv says here. The verse is Lamed Daled 34 in chapter 10 in Numbers. Ve'anan Hashem alehem yomam benasam mina machaneh. So this is a reference to the Israelites' travel in the desert, and it says that a cloud of God was upon them during the day, benasam min hamachaneh, in their traveling from the camp. So normally, in their rest periods, they would be within Machaneh Yisrael, the camp, the Israelite camp. And when they would leave the camp, then the cloud would descend upon them. So the Netziv here is going to pick up on the fact that it says that the cloud would envelop them when they left the camp. So here's the Netziv. Ki biyotam yoshvim b'machaneh hayu be'ohalim lahagen min hasharev. When they were dwelling in the camp, they were in tents, ohalim, to protect themselves from the heat and from the desert storms that would come. So the Netziv is inferring that they're, generally speaking, the Israelites needed protection in the camp from just the climate, and the protection in the camp was their tent. Aval, but, as our verse says, benasam mina machaneh, when they would leave the camp, when they would travel out of the camp, haya he'anan magin, it was this great cloud which would protect them. Nimtza, it therefore emerges. Ma shekatuv, what it says in that verse in Leviticus, Ki b'Sukkot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael, that I would make the Israelites, I caused them to dwell in huts in the wilderness. Haya gam Sukkot mamash, gam ananei kavod. He says, the Netziv says, that famous argument about whether the huts that's referred to in Parshat Emor and that we have to think about on Sukkot, whether those were actual huts, actual tents, or the clouds of glory, says the Netziv, it was both. He reconciles this argument and says they're both true. Hainu, what do I mean by that, says the Netziv? Bishat chania hayu sukkot mamash. When they would rest, when they would encamp, then they were in actual sukkahs, sukkot, their tents, the ohalim, which they needed for protection in the camp from the general desert climate. Ubisha hamasa hayu ananei kavod. But when they would travel, it was the clouds of glory which would encircle them. In fact, the Midrash says that there were 7 clouds, one for each cardinal direction, one for above, one for below, and then an additional cloud which would travel in front of them, which seems to be what's being referred to in our verse here. So, what is the chidush? What is the innovation here of the Netziv? That there's this general outstanding argument throughout the Torah about what is the nature of these sukkot that are referred to in Parshat Emor, and that we have to have in mind when we're sitting in our sukkahs in the holiday of Sukkot. Is it physical sukkahs, or is it a spiritual, metaphysical cloud which would surround the Jewish people? The Netziv says it's very simple. The answer is both existed. One, the physical existed in the camp when we needed physical protection, and the metaphysical, spiritual, maybe supernatural cloud, the Ananei Kavod, encircled us and enveloped us when we left the camp, when we needed another type of protection. And the Netziv reconciles and solves that extant machloket through a sharp and close reading of our verse here in Parshat Behaalotcha, which with this inference that it's the cloud would envelop us and guard us on our journey out of the camp, but that infers for the Netziv that there was something else which had to guard us in the camp. That must have been our general tents and sukkot, as it were, that we lived in then. So a nice sharp analysis of the Netziv of our verse here, which allows him to solve this general argument elsewhere in the Torah. Very beautiful. As always, a pleasure learning with you, and I look forward to more next week. Take care.